My son called me on a Tuesday afternoon in early October, which already felt strange. He never called on weekdays. He was busy, always busy. With work, with the kids, with whatever his wife had planned for the week. So when I saw his name on my phone, I actually picked up faster than I should have, already feeling something warm in my chest. Maybe he wanted to grab coffee. Maybe the grandkids were doing a school play, and he was finally calling to invite me properly, instead of sending a text 3 days after the fact. Hey, Dad. Hey, son. Everything all right? There was a pause. Not long, but the kind that sits wrong in your stomach. Yeah, everything's fine. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about Thanksgiving. I sat down at the kitchen table. I'd been standing at the counter eating a bowl of soup, which tells you something about how I spend my evenings these days. Retired 64 years old, 1,100 square feet in Barrie, Ontario. I set the bowl down. What about it? Another pause. So this year, Diane and I were thinking, we want it to be a little more relaxed. Just immediate family, keep it simple. I waited for the rest of the sentence. The part where he said, but of course you're coming, Dad. That part didn't come. Okay, I said slowly. What does that mean, exactly? It means. He stopped. I could hear him choosing his words carefully, the way he used to when he was 17 and had broken something in the garage and was trying to explain it before I found out on my own. It means we're keeping it to just us. Me and Diane, the kids, and Diane's parents. And Diane's parents. I didn't say anything for a moment. I was doing the math in my head. Immediate family included Diane's parents, who lived 40 minutes away in Collingwood, but not me, his father, who lived 25 minutes in the other direction. I see, I said. It's not personal, Dad. It's just, Diane's dad, you know how he is. He and you, sometimes it's a little tense, and Diane just wants 1 year where things are smooth, where no one has to manage anything. You understand, right? I said I understood. I hung up and sat there for a long time with my bowl of soup going cold. His name is Theodore, my son. 38 years old, project manager at a civil engineering firm in Barrie. I am proud of him. Genuinely, properly proud of him. In a way that I have never been very good at saying out loud. His mother would have said, that's my problem. She probably wasn't wrong. His wife's name is Diane. I want to be fair to Diane. She is organized. She is a good mother. She loves my son, and she has always been polite to me in the way that people are polite to someone they are obligated to be polite to. Her father, I'll call him her father, because that's what he is, moved up from Mississauga 3 years ago after he retired, and since then he has become the fixture. He is at every birthday, every Easter. He is the one who taught my grandson how to fish, even though I have been fishing since before Diane's father had a driver's license. I don't dislike the man. I want to be honest about that. What I dislike is the slow, quiet way things shifted after he arrived. The way I started getting calls a little later. The way plans started getting made without me, and I'd find out through a photo my daughter-in-law posted online. The way I once drove 40 minutes to a Thanksgiving dinner to find out Diane's father had already carved the turkey and was sitting at the head of my son's table like he'd been doing it for decades. I hadn't said anything. Maybe that was my problem too. But I'd assumed, foolishly, maybe, that Thanksgiving was still mine. That I still had that. I'm not a man who sits around feeling sorry for himself. I want to make that clear because this story might start to sound like that. And it isn't. After I hung up from my son, I had maybe 2 days where I ate too much toast and watched too much television and thought about calling my sister in Halifax just to have someone to talk to. Then I got up. I had been meaning to call the community center on Dunlop Street for months. There's a program there. I'd seen a flyer at the library back in the spring, where they organize Thanksgiving meals for seniors who would otherwise spend the day alone. They're always short on volunteers. They need people who can cook, people who can drive, people who can just sit with someone for a few hours and make them feel like they're not invisible. I called on a Thursday. A woman named Patricia answered and sounded so relieved to hear from me that I almost laughed. "Can you commit to the full day?" she asked. "We start setup at 7 in the morning. The meal runs until about 3. Then there's cleanup." "I don't have anywhere else to be," I said. She took that as a yes. I didn't tell my son I wasn't going to spend Thanksgiving alone. I don't know why, exactly. It wasn't calculated, it wasn't strategy. I just didn't feel like having the conversation where he told me he was glad I'd found something to do, said in the careful tone of someone relieved that a problem had resolved itself without their help. The Friday before Thanksgiving, I went to the grocery store and bought the things Patricia had asked volunteers to bring. 2 frozen pumpkin pies, a bag of dinner rolls, a case of apple juice. I came home and ironed my good flannel shirt. I went to bed early and set my alarm for 6. The morning of Thanksgiving was one of those cold, clear Ontario mornings where the sky looks like blue glass. I drove into town with the pies on the passenger seat and the radio playing classic country, and I felt, this sounds strange, but it's true. I felt lighter than I had in months. The community center was already busy when I arrived. Patricia was exactly who I'd imagined from the phone. 50s, gray ponytail, the kind of competent calm that comes from running things for a long time. She handed me an apron, pointed me at the kitchen, and introduced me to the other volunteers. A retired teacher, a university student doing community hours, a woman about my age who had recently moved to Barrie from Sudbury and didn't know many people yet. We spent the morning cooking. I made the stuffing from scratch, which I haven't done in probably 4 years. The retired teacher stood next to me and talked about her grandchildren while we chopped onion and celery together. And there was something so ordinary and good about it that I had to keep my eyes on the cutting board. By noon, the dining room was full. There were 43 guests that day. I know because I helped set the tables. They were all ages. A man in his 80s who had driven himself from his apartment on the other side of town. A woman in her 60s who kept saying she wasn't sad. She just preferred smaller gatherings. 3 young guys in their 20s who'd come to Canada from the Philippines 2 years ago and had no family nearby yet. We ate together. Someone brought a fiddle. One of the young men from the Philippines turned out to be an excellent card player and taught 3 of the seniors a game I'd never seen before. I spent most of the afternoon with a man named Edmund, 81 years old. Hard of hearing, former railway worker. His wife had passed the previous February. He wasn't much of a talker, but he was a good listener, and so was I, so we sat together by the window with our coffee after the meal and watched the leaves in the parking lot blow around in the wind. And that was enough. At one point, Patricia came by to check on us and said, "I'm glad you called. Lyle is me. I should have said that earlier. My name is Lyle." I drove home at 4:30 with an empty pie dish on the passenger seat and the radio still playing. I wasn't sad. I want to be clear about that. I was a little tired in the good way, the way you're tired after a day that meant something. I fed my dog. I poured myself 2 fingers of rye and sat in the armchair by the window with the lamp on. And I thought about Edmund, who was probably home by now doing the same thing. And I thought about the men from the Philippines who were probably texting their families across 12 time zones. And I thought, this is fine. This is a life. My phone rang at 6:47 that evening. I looked at the screen. It was my son. I almost didn't answer. Not out of anger. I want to be honest about that. I just didn't have the energy for the conversation, where he asked how I was doing in the careful, checking a box way, and I had to reassure him that I was fine. But I answered, "Hey, son. Dad." His voice sounded different. There was something in it I hadn't heard in a while. Urgency, maybe, or something like alarm. "Dad, are you watching the news?" "No. Why?" I heard him say something to Diane, muffled, hand over the receiver. Then he came back. "Dad, Channel 4. Turn it on." I found the remote on the side table and turned on the television. The local Barrie news was on. I almost never watch the local news. I get most of my news from the radio. So it took me a moment to recognize that the image on screen was the community center on Dunlop Street. There was a reporter standing outside in the parking lot, and behind her, through the glass doors, I could see the dining room where I'd spent the last 8 hours. Then they cut to footage from inside, clearly shot earlier in the day. The tables, the guests, the fiddle player, the card game in the corner. "A heartwarming Thanksgiving story out of Barrie tonight," the anchor said. 43 local seniors and newcomers to the city gathered for a free Thanksgiving dinner organized by the Dunlop Community Center. staffed entirely by volunteers. But it was one volunteer in particular who caught the attention of our crew. A retired pipefitter who spent the last 3 years helping fund the program anonymously before showing up to cook and serve this year. I sat up. Lyle. She said my last name on television, and I'm not going to put it in writing here, but she said my name, my full name, has been quietly donating to the program since 2021, a fact that staff only discovered this year when the program's financial records were reviewed for an expansion canch grant application. I had forgotten about that completely. I had genuinely forgotten. When I retired, I'd set up a monthly automatic transfer to 3 charities: the food bank, a veterans organization, and the community center program. I set it up in the first year of retirement when my pension was coming in, and I had more than I needed, and my wife had just passed, and I didn't know what to do with myself. I never thought much about it afterward. It just ran in the background the way automatic transfers do. When we asked my name again, why he chose to volunteer in person this year, he said he simply had a free day and thought he'd be useful. I remembered saying that to Patricia when she'd asked the same question. I had a free day and thought I'd be useful. It had seemed like the most ordinary thing in the world. Patricia Kowalczyk, director of the program, says the anonymous donations have kept the Thanksgiving meal running for 3 years. Without it, we wouldn't have had the funds. It's that simple, she said. The phone was still in my hand. I could hear my son breathing. Dad, he said. His voice was different now, quieter. How long have you been doing that? Doing what? Donating to. Why didn't you tell anyone? I thought about it for a moment. I don't know, I said. There didn't seem to be anything to tell. There was a long silence. Were you there today? He asked. Were you at the community center today? Yes. So you spent Thanksgiving. It was a good day, I said. How was dinner? He didn't answer that. I heard him say something to Diane again, the muffled kind. Then he said, Dad, I want to come over. Tonight? Tonight? He was there in 40 minutes. He came alone, which I hadn't expected. I had made coffee by the time I heard his truck in the driveway. He came in the back door, the way he always used to when he was growing up. Never rang the bell, just came in through the kitchen and stood there in his jacket for a moment, looking at me like he wasn't sure where to start. Sit down, I said. I poured him a coffee. He sat at the kitchen table, the same table I'd sat at when he called me in October, and he wrapped both hands around the mug and didn't say anything for a while. I shouldn't have told you not to come, he said finally. No, I agreed. You shouldn't have. It wasn't just Diane's idea. He looked up at me. I want you to know that. It wasn't just her. I went along with it because I thought it would be easier. I don't know what I thought, that you'd be fine, that you always seem fine. I'm good at seeming fine, I said. He nodded slowly. He knew that about me. He'd always known that about me. It had served us both poorly over the years, me being too good at seeming fine, him learning not to look too hard. The donations, he said. Mom knew? Your mother knew, I said. She set up the food bank one, and I added the others after she passed. It was something to do. He put his face in his hands for a moment. Not crying. My son doesn't cry easily, which is one of the things about him that is most like me, but doing something close to it. I keep thinking about you here, he said, today. By yourself. I wasn't by myself, I said. I was with 43 people. You know what I mean? I do, I said. And I'm telling you, it was a good day. I'm not saying that to make you feel better. I'm saying it because it's true. He looked at me for a long time. Diane's father, he said. I know it bothers you, that he's around so much. Theodore. I shook my head. I don't need to be anybody's favorite. I don't need to be the only grandfather in the room. I just need to be in the room. He was quiet. You've got 2 fathers at that table now, I said. One biological and one by marriage. That's not uncommon. It works when people decide it's going to work. When nobody gets pushed out to make someone else comfortable. He looked at his coffee. She's going to want to apologize. She doesn't have to apologize, I said. Just invite me to Christmas. He laughed at that, a real laugh, surprised out of him, and looked up at me like he had when he was young and I'd said something that caught him off guard. Yeah, he said. Okay. We sat there a while longer. I let the dog in from the back and she walked straight to my son and put her head on his knee, which she has always done, and which has always made him look 17 again. "She's getting old," he said, scratching her ears. "We all are," I said. That was 2 weeks ago. My daughter-in-law called the next morning, and we had a short conversation that was uncomfortable in the necessary way. The kind of conversation that clears something between two people when they're both willing to let it be cleared. She said she was sorry. I said I appreciated that. She said Christmas would be at their house, and I was welcome the whole day. I said that sounded good. I talked to Edmund last week. Patricia gave me his number when I stopped by the center to drop off a check for the expansion fund. Apparently, a few people saw the news segment and called in, which made Patricia laugh when she told me about it. Edmund and I are going to watch the hockey game at his place on Saturday. His building has a common room with a big television, and he says his neighbor makes excellent chili. I've been thinking about what my son said. "You always seem fine." He meant it as a kind of accusation, or maybe a confession. A way of saying, "I used your self-sufficiency against you. I told myself you didn't need what you actually needed. And I understand that. I was the same way with my own father. I assumed he was sturdy. I assumed he didn't require tending. I showed up at Christmas and forgot to call in between, and he died in his sleep one February, and I've been rearranging the regret ever since. I don't want that for my son. I don't want him to be 64 and rearranging regret about me. I want him to know that I'm here, that I'm a person with a life that has weight and meaning, and that being in his life is something I want, not because I'm lonely, but because he is my son and I am his father. And those 40 years of showing up for each other don't just evaporate because things got complicated. I'm a retired pipefitter from Barrie, Ontario. I eat soup alone at my kitchen table, and I have a dog who is getting old. And I set up a monthly transfer years ago to help people I'd never meet have a decent meal in November. That's not a remarkable life, but it's mine, and it turns out, if the news is to be believed, that it's worth something. Christmas is in 6 weeks. I already know what I'm getting the grandkids. I'm looking forward to it more than I have in years.